One French-American cultural difference which particularly fascinates me since I've been living part-time in Paris is something I've written about in my book, Poisoned by Pollution, An Unexpected Spiritual Journey. It concerns the way that we Americans tend to emphasize quantity, whereas the French tend to value quality. So when buying food, for example, we Americans tend to think most about how we can get it for the lowest price. Parisians, on the other hand, tend to be more concerned with what kind of quality they're getting for their money, and they're willing to pay more for quality. We Americans spend less of a percentage of our income on food than citizens in any other country of the world. We even tend to emphasize quantity in the way we choose to lead our lives, such as when we strive to accomplish as many things as possible in a day, rather than, say, strive for a quality day filled with joy. We'll even value people by quantifiable things, such as when we're impressed by how many boards a person sits on or how much money one makes, rather than for that person's qualities, say whether he is compassionate or loving. We'll refer to a person as being worth $5 million as if money is a measure of that person's value. I found that my Parisian friends are not nearly as impressed by such things, especially not by money. One of my Paris friends, who is very successful in his career, once told me that he's shocked when he visits the United States and people ask him how much money he makes in his field. A French person would never ask me that, he said. Then he explained that when French people meet someone, they're more likely to think things like, "Do I find you to be an interesting person?" This French emphasis on quality actually leads me to being in better health while in Paris, because chemicals in many French foods and products tend to be lower. You see, I have an illness which has forced me to live mostly housebound for 18 years and to avoid contact with everyday chemicals. An example of the French emphasis on quality would be how French fragrances don't sicken me nearly as much as they do at home. I've learned that because we Americans tend to make rock-bottom prices a priority, perfume companies will make different fragrances for the U.S. market and use ingredients which are illegal in France. A Parisian friend explained that most French would be suspicious of the potential adverse health effects from ingredients that we Americans routinely use in fragrances. This quality-quantity issue has run through my mind recently as I began sorting through my family's picture slides to choose photos to have scanned. I grew up mostly overseas and my father took many pictures which bring back wonderful memories. As far as I'm concerned, his photographs are our family's most valuable possession. When I was 1 year old, my parents took me to live in Ghana, West Africa, where my father helped set up and teach at the first Black African business school in Africa. There we lived in a house without glass windows, in a neighborhood where people sat at the dinner table with tennis rackets to keep the bats out of the food. My brother and I loved going down to the beach to watch the ships being loaded. Crews of men singing in unison would run through the rough surf with bags of cocoa on their backs, deposit their cargo into small boats, and row them out to anchored ships. During these years, to escape the brutal heat in the summer, we lived in a village in the Austrian Alps. Then when I was 6, we moved to Egypt, to a town just outside Cairo, where my father worked for the Ford Foundation. Of all the countries I've lived in, Egypt is my favorite. On weekends, my family would go on outings for picnics at one of the many pyramids in the desert, or to an ancient temple, or into nearby villages. My 2 brothers and I loved digging in the desert sand, where we often found such treasures as 3,500-year-old beads from the necklaces of mummies. Going to the old marketplace in Cairo intrigued me as well, although I was easily bored by the hours my parents would spend bargaining for antiques, as was the local custom. Sometimes instead we took our picnics onto boats and sailed on the Nile River. During the summer, we would travel to see our relatives in the U.S. and would stop to visit countries in Europe along the way. Travel and adventure seeped into my bloodstream so much that after returning to the U.S. for high school, I went off to India and France as an exchange student and lived with native families there. So as I embarked on our family slide scanning project, I weighed not only the cost, but also the quality we would get for our money. The cheapest ways to scan the slides would have involved sending them to India for scanning, or to some place where I wouldn't be able to communicate with the person doing the scanning. I vetoed the idea of buying a scanner and doing the task myself when I learned that it's not easy to scan old slides, as salespeople had led me to believe. So I chose a company with a middle-of-the-road price, which I found on the internet, and the experience became a good example of how spending more money can wind up proving a better value. My family members and I split the cost of the project. Tom Lee, the owner of Lee Digital Scanning, not only worked closely with me to make sure the photo scans had well-balanced colors and that dirty slides were clean, but he also educated me about the various ways we could create something that my family members would most enjoy. He showed me how to make it easy to use no matter what equipment or technical skills my family members possess. For a modest price, when Tom scans slides, he will also create a slideshow out of them set to music, which can be played on a television or computer. The slideshow ended up being the best part of the final project because it's much more fun to view the slides this way, and it makes it more likely that we'll watch them again and again. Later on, I felt even more strongly that we had gotten a good value when, much to my chagrin, I couldn't find one of the slideshow DVDs. I was relieved to learn that Tom keeps copies of everything he does, and he stores them in a vault. When I think of the other ways I could have had our slides scanned, I believe that not going the cheapest route turned out to be the best deal in the end. How would you like to learn more about what my illness and living in Paris have taught me about creating a quality life? You'll find it in my book, Poisoned by Pollution: An Unexpected Spiritual Journey.